Welcome back to Close Up. In New Hampshire's big statewide races, candidates are gearing up for a crucial stretch over the summer that will decide how things shake out in September. All of the contenders seeking to succeed Congressman Chris Pappas in the 1st Congressional District are working hard to try to win votes. And we're joined this morning by one of the candidates in that race, Carleigh. Carleigh, thanks for coming in.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, crunch time. You know, this is really the crucial moment in this race where we're going to see what happens and who ends up on top. The dynamics of this race, we haven't seen polling in a while, but it hasn't seemed to change much over the time that we have seen that. How are you or anyone else going to shake up what's been going on in this race where we see Stephanie Shaheen sort of locked in at #1 and everyone else jumbled below?
Yeah, that's a great question, Adam. And I think part of it has to do with all of the amazing organizing that we are doing on the ground. So I have put over 20,000 miles on my car. I have been in every single town in this district, in living rooms and driveways and church basements and a couple church attics. And I've asked people, you know, that question, what do you wish that politicians understood better? And I've asked them now a second question, which is, how do you want to get involved in my campaign? And as a result, we have hundreds of volunteers across the district, and we are organizing in our communities, and I think we're building a real movement here.
You know, obviously you're in that progressive lane. What separates you from the other more progressive candidates? In particular, we see some momentum now behind Christian Urrutia with endorsements and whatnot. What separates you there?
Yeah, I think that I am grateful for all of the progressives who are supporting my campaign, working really hard on my behalf, have endorsed me, but I also have supporters from across the political spectrum right now, and I think that's what we need in this district, someone who can bring lots of different kinds of people together in support of a change candidate, right? People who recognize that, like, until Washington sees our problems as their problems, nothing will change. And so people resonate with the fact that, you know, I'm a working mom, I have little kids, I'm married to an English school teacher, an English middle school teacher, I'm a former union organizer, I serve right now in local government, and so I'm actually governing and seeing people's problems and helping them address them firsthand on a daily basis. And I think those are the kinds of experiences that people are really looking for, whether or not they're progressive. And so it's great because we're inviting everybody in to be part of this.
If you're in Congress in January 2027, what are you going to do to stop this so-called political weaponization fund? $1.8 billion the president wants to use to give to people who he believes have been wronged by the previous administration.
Yeah, it's actually really horrific. I mean, the number of people who I've talked to this week who saw that number and just like their mouths were hanging open. I'm looking at it too and I'm saying, oh my God, this level of corruption is so absurd. We need to get not just, you know, a new Congress that will actually hold Donald Trump accountable, but we need a real accounting for like all of the money. So it's not just this $1.8 billion slush fund. It's the hundreds of millions of dollars that big tech corporations and right-wing billionaires have given Trump in order to consolidate our media and our political system. We see it going to this arch. We see it going to that ballroom. You know, we see it across the board. And so one of the things that I would do and that I really, really think a lot of people are excited about is making sure that our president can't trade stocks. And not just our president, but our vice president and all of our members of Congress, regardless of political party, and our Supreme Court justices. Because the level of corruption that we're seeing right now is so outrageous and unconscionable that everybody is just looking for people who have specific ways to go about reining it in.
How do you go about doing that, though, in terms of discovering who's using these, like the poly market accounts, when we see these bets being made on decisions that happen 15 minutes later? How exactly do you stop that? Okay,
so one of the things that's wild is that Donald Trump has made over, he's made over 3,000 trades since this last year started, and a lot of those trades have been in defense contractors and defense stocks, and then he went and launched this war in the Middle East. And so that's one place where we can say specifically, hey, we are watching what you're doing and we are going to enact legislation that prohibits you from doing this. We're also going to bring you in and have some oversight, right? And not just oversight where we have a conversation, but oversight where we say, here is the punishment or the penalty for doing things that are corrupt.
And yet the executive controls the Department of Justice, right? And so what is Congress going to be able to do if you're in there for another 2 years of the Trump administration if the Justice Department isn't going to investigate?
I think impeachment is the great place to go with this, Adam. And I think that impeachment is the kind of thing that excites me because it's enabling Congress to do one of its two core missions, right? Congress has a job to oversee, do oversight, and also legislate. And so if we can oversee the president at the same time that we can pass some of the legislation that will really help people who are struggling right now, fully fund our public schools, fix our healthcare system, break up big tech, that's going to give people the sense that our country is back on track.
And yet, 2 prior impeachments, the outcome of both of those impeachments arguably left President Trump more powerful than before. How do you avoid a similar outcome if you do it again?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not going to be running for a 3rd term if I have anything to do with it. And also, it's about saying, hey, this is a nation of laws. It's not about Donald Trump. It's about all of us. It's about making sure that we all uphold the laws and that we make sure that everything applies equally to people in power. And saying that, oh, we're not going to be able to do this, or, oh, he's too big or too powerful, like, that doesn't serve us. In order for us to get back on track, we need to say, hey, this is a nation of laws and everyone follows them equally. And this is why finance reform is so important, and making sure that our members of Congress are also following the laws and held accountable when they don't.
President Trump grabs a lot of the headlines and a lot of the attention always. But for Democrats, you know, they have to have a message beyond just we're opposed to Trump, right? So the DNC just released under great pressure this autopsy of sort of what went wrong. It still seems, and even sitting here listening to candidates, there doesn't seem to be a lot of self-introspection about sort of what needs to change in order for more voters to get, you know, in on that Democratic side of things. So do you think there's any position that Democrats took in 2024 that they need to abandon or adjust on in 2026 and 2028?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm running for Congress, right? Like, literally, we are doing the same things over and over again in this country and as a party, and nothing is getting better for regular people, and it drives me nuts. I think that what we need to focus on right now is not just what happened, right? What were the messages we were sending, but who were our messengers? And I think one of the big things that was missing in 2024 and that was missing in that autopsy was Gaza. We need to have a conversation as a Democratic Party about the genocide. We need to talk to people about, hey, what this means is that we need to make sure that there's humanitarian aid that goes to Palestine and helps Palestinian people, right? It doesn't mean that what happened on October 7th with Hamas was okay, but if we as a party can't have a conversation about the atrocities that are happening there and do something about it, you know, it's just going to lead to further acts of anti-Semitism in the United States and further anti-Muslim sentiment, and that is not okay.
And yet, for most swing voters, they look at what happened on October 7th and say Israel has a right to respond. Clearly, we are well past in 2 years sort of the what people would consider a commensurate response, and Israel is continuing to go, and that certainly has alienated some voters. But for the people who see this murderous intent of Hamas and people siding essentially against Israel, how do you win over those voters who are saying, what the heck is going on here? We think the bad guys are the ones who were killing people at concerts back in October of 2023.
I mean, there could be multiple bad guys. Like, that's what makes this so complicated. And that's what's really hard for a lot of people, I think, to understand, you know, saying that we're not going to allow Israel to continue to commit a genocide, to continue to harm people. We're not going to continue sending them money for this offensive weaponry is really important. And that's a line that we can draw. And we can also say, hey, we really want to make sure that the Israeli people are safe in their homes. And, you know, arming Hamas or alienating people who live in Palestine, enabling these settlements to continue, all of this is not enabling people to be more safe. And it's not enabling us in the United States to focus on the problems that we have to address here. Like, we have a really broken healthcare system. We have a really broken public education system. We have so many things that are really hard, and now we can't trust the Democratic Party necessarily to do anything about any of it. And that's what's so frustrating. I think it's the both and, right? The seeing that, you know, we're in another war in the Middle East, we've had all of these government shutdowns, and we haven't gotten this country back on track. We still have a $7.25 minimum wage. Our healthcare workers are struggling right now. Like, our childcare workers are struggling. Our older people are struggling. What are we doing to help them? And it doesn't seem like we're doing anything to help them.
Big motivating factor in 24 was immigration as well. What about immigration and what Democrats need to do differently? What if there's this return to like Biden-era policies? Are you going to stand up and say, no, we need a strong border?
Oh, well, absolutely. I think that what's so important is that immigration enforcement and abolishing ICE, for example, are not mutually exclusive. I have on my website, CarleighBerriant.com, a whole plan for how we can fix and create a just and humane immigration system, how we can ensure that criminal enforcement for things like human trafficking and smuggling are handled by the organizations that we already have that can do that stuff, like the DEA and the FBI. But we can also make sure that, you know, asylum seekers and refugees and people who are looking to be reunited with their families have a functional immigration system. We do not have that right now. Legal immigration has come to almost a complete standstill. And what's happened is we're treating, you know, immigrants as criminals, and that just needs to stop.
But should people who commit crimes be deported?
I think that people who commit crimes should be given their day in court and they should be tried. And if they are found guilty, I think that deportation should absolutely be on the table. But what we're seeing right now is the deportation of people who are not criminals. 2 out of 3 people who've been deported since January had no criminal record whatsoever. And what's also important to point out is that in the last year of the Biden administration, the level of immigrants and people coming to the border dropped precipitously, way before Trump even took office. And I think that what that means is that, again, we have a completely dysfunctional immigration system. And we need a Congress that has a conversation about what does this look like? How can we make sure that, immigration claims are handled in civil court, for example? How can we make sure that, ICE agents are held accountable and that this administration is not able to weaponize and terrorize people?
One last question for you. I want to sneak this in here. I've heard some people say, gosh, we really need a progressive candidate for governor, and we wish Carleigh would do it. Has anyone come to you with that message saying, hey, why don't you consider this other race?
A couple of people have come to me with this question, and
what's the response?
I think it's amazing that so many people would trust me to run the state of New Hampshire, and I hope they support me as I try to run for Congress. Okay,
Carleigh Barriant, thanks for joining us here on Close Up. We'll see you back here actually in about a month and a half because we're going to try and sneak in more interviews with more candidates here. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Adam.
All right, we'll be right back with the small but important honor being extended to more members of Gold Star families here in New Hampshire.